interesting front page story today in the Journal talking about how that deal sort of came together. And this was Instagram first saying to Mark Zuckerberg, hey, give us $2 billion.
Yeah, to me, I mean, there are a couple of interesting parts of the article. One is just how it all came about and how this was really a Mark Zuckerberg show, and it says a lot about how Facebook is run on the eve of its IPO. But there's also this question about valuation, which is funny. I mean, on Thursday, Instagram closes a deal with Silicon Valley investors, who are all pretty smart guys, that values the company at $500 million. And then somewhere over the weekend, the CEO of the company tells Mark Zuckerberg he'd rather have $2 billion, and they end up paying $1 billion. So
you got a great deal.
Exactly,
you got
right. You got half price, right?
Company has no revenues whatsoever. It has no real prospects of revenues, and people just put money in at an outrageous valuation of $500 million. Right. And the guy, it's like well,
that's sort of the definition of chutzpah.
Let's go halvesies. It's like somebody, you're selling your house. Somebody you offer twice the price. Oh, we got half. Meet in between. Look how reasonable I'm being.
So what does this say though about Mark Zuckerberg, as well as because it seems he didn't really include the board of Facebook in all this? What does this say about the corporate governance of Facebook?
It's not it's not really an issue of like impropriety or anything like that. No, but it isn't. But it isn't right. But he owns.
It's more one of judgment.
Exactly. He controls almost 60% of the voting rights of the company. So he can decide what the board's going to do by fiat, basically. But that's what he did. He decided this was an acquisition he needed to do, and he reached out directly on Thursday and negotiated for 3 days and told the board Sunday morning that they were close to a deal, that would spend $1 billion of the company's cash and stock. Yeah. So it does.
Well, it also goes to show you how he looks at the stock, which is it's kind of paper money. It's an acquisition currency. It's not. You always have to think what difference would it make if you put $1 billion in cash in Mark Zuckerberg's pocket, and said, here's your $1 billion, spend it on this. Would he do the same thing? And most times the answer is no.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point, and it also brings up an interesting point on the whole valuation issue. I mean, you obviously can't use anything like sum of the parts or discounted cash flow or anything like that because the company has one part and no cash flow. So, well, no operating cash flow anyway. So
what makes that sum of the parts difficult?
Exactly. So he shifts the discussion to sort of its value as a percentage of Facebook, and they sort of came around to this idea of 1% of Facebook, and so that's the way he sort of framed the discussion and came up with $1 billion.
It's going to be curious what the impact of this has on the IPO, because I'm sure the bankers who were leading the IPO were horrified when they learned about this.
Especially because if you're an investor, one of the concerns you have,
well, that's one of the reasons,
is that you're always going to be sort of this minority investor who at the whim of Mark Zuckerberg. Yeah. And this just reinforces he can go out and do whatever he wants. And
or Larry and Sergey. I mean, you see with Google coming up with a new class of non-voting stock, this isn't necessarily going to go away 5 years after they go public.
If anything, what Google is doing shows it might become even more entrenched.
Exactly. So for these really hot companies that investors are clamoring to get into, there's a sort of a different reality than investing in Coca-Cola.
And the thing to look at, it's very hard, especially looking at these deals. To make sense of them in the given moment. What I mean by that is, remember when they did the YouTube deal at Google, and just for clarification, my wife does work at Google, so I disclose that. But it seemed like a lot of money,
right?
Yeah, right. It was a lot of money at the time,
right?
It was perceived as a big premium. YouTube was making money, but it wasn't making a lot of money,
right?
And it turned out, I think, by almost any metric, to have been a very, very good deal for Google at the time.
Yeah.
So you can never tell on these things, although the way this was done did strike me as a little strange.
It does still sort of beg the question, I think, in investors' minds, saying, well, is there adult supervision there?
Yeah.
And does the adult supervision have any say?
And Facebook's a company that's made a big point about having adult supervision and wanting to be sort of almost stayed for the context of a tech company blue chip once they go public, and they brought in Sheryl Sandberg to provide that adult supervision, and she was notified, but she wasn't involved in the negotiations.
She was told. So she was saying, I had this guy over my house. I would pay him $1 billion for Instagram. That's basically the way the story runs, right? I mean,
basically. There is, I mean, aside from the whole valuation question and the fact that they don't bring in any money, there is an important strategic consideration here for Facebook, which is they really don't have a good position in mobile, and photos are the main reason people go spend time on the site. So a competitor that's getting a huge following on mobile in photos is a problem.